Hello and welcome, folks, to day 200 of our chronological journey through the Bible. That's a major milestone, folks, day 200, and kudos to everyone who has hung in there throughout this journey. Today we return to the historical narrative as we read from 2 Kings in chapter 18 verses 1 through 8, and then we move to 2 Chronicles chapters 29 through 31. Both of which describe the early reign of King Hezekiah of Judah. Hezekiah stands out as one of the most faithful kings of Judah. At a time when idolatry had spread deeply throughout the nation, he initiated sweeping reforms to restore true worship. He reopened the temple, removed idols, reinstated the Passover celebration, and called the people back to covenant faithfulness. And alongside these historical events, we will also be reading Psalm 48, a psalm celebrating the beauty and security of Jerusalem, the city of God. Chronologically, this psalm reflects the renewed sense of worship and confidence in God that characterized Hezekiah's reforms. So let's start with a simple prayer. Lord, thank you for reviving us with your word, Lord, just as you revived your people in Hezekiah's day. And help us, Lord, to renew our devotion, and may our worship arise from deep within our very being and not just be lip service. We ask this in Jesus' name. Amen. Alright, we'll start in 2 Kings chapter 18. We'll be reading the first 8 verses and then moving on to 2 Chronicles chapter 29. In the 3rd year of the reign of Hoshea son of Elah over Israel, Hezekiah son of Ahaz became king of Judah. He was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. He removed the high places, shattered the sacred pillars, and cut down the Asherah poles. He also demolished the bronze snake called Nehushtan that Moses had made, for up to that time the Israelites had burnt incense to it. Hezekiah trusted in the Lord, the God of Israel. No king of Judah was like him, either before him or after him. He remained faithful to the Lord and did not turn from following him. He kept the commandments that the Lord had given to Moses. And the Lord was with Hezekiah, and he prospered wherever he went. He rebelled against the king of Assyria and refused to serve him. He defeated the Philistines as far as Gaza and its borders, from watchtower to fortified city. 2 Chronicles chapter 29. Hezekiah was 25 years old when he became king, and he reigned in Jerusalem 29 years. His mother's name was Abijah, the daughter of Zechariah, and he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, just as his father David had done. In the 1st month of the 1st year of his reign, Hezekiah opened and repaired the doors of the house of the Lord. Then he brought in the priests and Levites and gathered them in the square on the east side. Listen to me, O Levites, he said. Consecrate yourselves now and consecrate the house of the Lord, the God of your fathers. Remove from the holy place every impurity. For our fathers were unfaithful and did evil in the sight of the Lord our God. They abandoned him, turned their faces away from the dwelling place of the Lord, and turned their backs on him. They also shut the doors of the portico and extinguished the lamps. They did not burn incense or present burnt offerings in the holy place of the God of Israel. Therefore the wrath of the Lord has fallen upon Judah and Jerusalem, and he has made them an object of terror, horror, and scorn, as you can see with your own eyes. For behold, this is why our fathers have fallen by the sword, and our sons and daughters and wives are in captivity. Now it is in my heart to make a covenant with the Lord, the God of Israel, so that his fierce anger will turn away from us. Now, my sons, do not be negligent, for the Lord has chosen you to stand before him, to serve him, to minister before him, and to burn incense. Then the Levites set to work. Mahat son of Amasai and Joel son of Azariah from the Kohathites, Kish son of Abdi and Azariah son of Jehalel from the Merarites, Joah son of Zimmah and Eden son of Joah from the Gershonites, Shimri and Joel from the Elizaphanites, Zechariah and Mattaniah from the Asaphites, Jehiel and Shemaiah from the Hemonites, and Shemaiah and Uzziel from the Jeduthunites. When they had assembled their brothers and consecrated themselves, they went in to cleanse the house of the Lord, according to the command of the king by the words of the Lord. So the priests went inside the house of the Lord to cleanse it, and they brought out to the courtyard all the unclean things that they found in the temple of the Lord. Then the Levites took these things and carried them out to the Kidron valley. They began the consecration on the first day of the first month, and on the 8th day of the month they reached the portico of the Lord. For 8 more days they consecrated the house of the Lord itself, finishing on the 16th day of the first month. Then they went in to King Hezekiah and reported, "We have cleansed the entire house of the Lord, the altar of burnt offering with all its utensils, and the table of the showbread with all its utensils. Moreover, we have prepared and consecrated all the articles that King Ahaz in his unfaithfulness cast aside during his reign. They are now in front of the altar of the Lord." Early the next morning, King Hezekiah gathered the city officials and went up to the house of the Lord. They brought 7 bulls, 7 rams, 7 lambs, and 7 male goats as a sin offering for the kingdom, for the sanctuary, and for Judah. And the king commanded the priests, the descendants of Aaron, to offer them on the altar of the Lord. So they slaughtered the bulls, and the priests took the blood and splattered it on the altar. They slaughtered the rams and splattered the blood on the altar, and they slaughtered the lambs and splattered the blood on the altar. Then they brought the goats for the sin offering before the king and the assembly, who laid their hands on them. And the priests slaughtered the goats and put their blood on the altar for a sin offering, to make atonement for all Israel, because the king had ordered the burnt offering and the sin offering for all Israel. Hezekiah stationed the Levites in the house of the Lord with cymbals, harps, and lyres, according to the command of David, of Gad the king's seer, and of Nathan the prophet. For the command had come from the Lord through his prophets. The Levites stood with the instruments of David, and the priests with the trumpets. And Hezekiah ordered that the burnt offering be sacrificed on the altar. When the burnt offering began, the song of the Lord and the trumpets began as well, accompanied by the instruments of David king of Israel. The whole assembly was worshipping, the singers were singing, and the trumpeters were playing. All this continued until the burnt offering was completed. When the offerings were completed, the king and all those present with him bowed down and worshipped. Then King Hezekiah and his officials ordered the Levites to sing praises to the Lord in the words of David and of Asaph the seer. So they sang praises with gladness and bowed down and worshipped. Then Hezekiah said, "Now that you have consecrated yourselves to the Lord, come near and bring sacrifices and thank offerings to the house of the Lord." So the assembly brought sacrifices and thank offerings, and all whose hearts were willing brought burnt offerings. The number of burnt offerings the assembly brought was 70 bulls, 100 rams, and 200 lambs. All these were for a burnt offering to the Lord. And the consecrated offerings were 600 bulls and 3,000 sheep. However, since there were not enough priests to skin all the burnt offerings, their Levite brothers helped them until the work was finished, and until the priests had consecrated themselves. For the Levites had been more diligent in consecrating themselves than the priests had been. Furthermore, the burnt offerings were abundant, along with the fat of the peace offerings and the drink offerings for the burnt offerings. So the service of the house of the Lord was established. Then Hezekiah and all the people rejoiced at what God had prepared for the people, because everything had been accomplished so quickly. Chapter 30. Then Hezekiah sent word throughout all Israel and Judah, and he also wrote letters to Ephraim and Manasseh, inviting them to come to the house of the Lord in Jerusalem, to keep the Passover of the Lord, the God of Israel. For the king and his officials and the whole assembly in Jerusalem had decided to keep the Passover in the 2nd month, since they had been unable to keep it at the regular time, because not enough priests had consecrated themselves, and the people had not been gathered in Jerusalem. This plan pleased the king and the whole assembly. So they established a decree to circulate a proclamation throughout Israel, from Beersheba to Dan, that the people should come to keep the Passover of the Lord, the God of Israel, in Jerusalem, for they had not observed it in great numbers as prescribed. At the command of the king, the couriers went throughout Israel and Judah with letters from the king and his officials, which read, "Children of Israel, return to the Lord, the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Israel, so that he may return to those of you who remain, who have escaped the grasp of the kings of Assyria. Do not be like your fathers and brothers who were unfaithful to the Lord, the God of their fathers, so that he made them an object of horror, as you can see. Now do not stiffen your necks as your fathers did. Submit to the Lord and come to his sanctuary, which he has consecrated forever. Serve the Lord your God, so that his fierce anger will turn away from you, For if you return to the Lord, your brothers and sons will receive mercy in the presence of their captors and will return to this land. For the Lord your God is gracious and merciful. He will not turn his face away from you if you return to him." And the couriers traveled from city to city through the land of Ephraim and Manasseh as far as Zebulun. But the people scorned and mocked them. Nevertheless, some from Asher, Manasseh, and Zebulun humbled themselves and came to Jerusalem. Moreover, the power of God was on the people in Judah to give them one heart to obey the command of the king and his officials according to the word of the Lord. In the 2nd month, a very great assembly gathered in Jerusalem to celebrate the feast of unleavened bread. They proceeded to remove the altars in Jerusalem and to take away the incense altars and throw them into the Kidron valley. And on the 14th day of the 2nd month, they slaughtered the Passover lamb. The priests and Levites were ashamed, and they consecrated themselves and brought burnt offerings to the house of the Lord. They stood at their prescribed posts according to the law of Moses, the man of God. The priests splattered the blood which they received from the hand of the Levites. Since there were many in the assembly who had not consecrated themselves, the Levites were in charge of slaughtering the Passover lambs for every unclean person to consecrate the lambs to the Lord. A large number of the people, many from Ephraim, Manasseh, Issachar, and Zebulun, had not purified themselves, yet they ate the Passover contrary to what was written. But Hezekiah interceded for them, saying, "May the Lord who is good provide atonement for every one who sets his heart on seeking God, the Lord, the God of his fathers, even if he is not cleansed according to the purification rules of the sanctuary." And the Lord heard Hezekiah and healed the people. The Israelites who were present in Jerusalem celebrated the feast of unleavened bread for 7 days with great joy, and the Levites and priests praised the Lord day after day, accompanied by loud instruments of praise to the Lord. And Hezekiah encouraged all the Levites who performed skillfully before the Lord. For 7 days they ate their assigned portion, sacrificing peace offerings and giving thanks to the Lord, the God of their fathers. The whole assembly agreed to observe 7 more days, so they observed 7 days with joy. For Hezekiah king of Judah contributed 1,000 bulls and 7,000 sheep for the assembly, and the officials contributed 1,000 bulls and 10,000 sheep for the assembly, and a great number of priests consecrated themselves. Then the whole assembly of Judah rejoiced along with the priests and Levites and the whole assembly that had come from Israel, including the foreigners who had come from Israel and those who lived in Judah. So there was great rejoicing in Jerusalem, for nothing like this had happened there since the days of Solomon, son of David, king of Israel. Then the priests and the Levites stood to bless the people, and God heard their voice, and their prayer came into his holy dwelling place in heaven. Chapter 31. When all this had ended, the Israelites in attendance went out to the cities of Judah and broke up the sacred pillars, chopped down the Asherah poles, and tore down the high places and altars throughout Judah and Benjamin, as well as in Ephraim and Manasseh, until they had utterly destroyed them all. Then all the Israelites returned to their cities, each to his own property. Hezekiah re-established the divisions of the priests and Levites, each of them according to their duties as priests or Levites, for the burnt offerings and peace offerings, for ministry, for giving thanks, and for singing praises at the gates of the Lord's dwelling. The king contributed from his own possessions for the regular morning and evening burnt offerings, and for the burnt offerings on the Sabbaths, new moons, and appointed feasts, as written in the law of the Lord. Moreover, he commanded the people living in Jerusalem to make a contribution for the priests and Levites, so that they could devote themselves to the law of the Lord. As soon as the order went out, the Israelites generously provided the first fruits of the grain, new wine, oil, and honey, and of all the produce of the field, and they brought in abundance a tithe of everything. And the Israelites and Judahites who lived in the cities of Judah also brought a tithe of their herds and flocks, and a tithe of the holy things consecrated to the Lord their God, and they laid them in large heaps. In the 3rd month they began building up the heaps, and they finished in the 7th month. When Hezekiah and his officials came and viewed the heaps, they blessed the Lord and his people Israel. Then Hezekiah questioned the priests and Levites about the heaps, and Azariah the chief priest of the house of Zadok answered him, "Since the people began to bring their contributions into the house of the Lord, we have had enough to eat, and there's plenty left over, because the Lord has blessed his people. This great abundance is what is left over." Then Hezekiah commanded them to prepare storerooms in the house of the Lord, and they did so. And they faithfully brought in the contributions, tithes, and dedicated gifts. Conaniah the Levite was the officer in charge of them, and his brother Shimei was second. Jehiel, Azaziah, Nahath, Asahel, Jeremoth, Josabad, Eliel, Ismachiah, Mahath, and Benaiah were overseers under the authority of Conaniah and his brother Shimei, by appointment of King Hezekiah and of Azariah the chief official of the house of God. Kor, son of Imnah the Levite, the keeper of the east gate, was in charge of the freewill offerings given to God, distributing the contributions to the Lord and the consecrated gifts. Under his authority, Eden, Miniamin, Jeshua, Shemaiah, Amariah, Shechaniah faithfully distributed portions to their fellow priests in their cities according to their divisions, old and young alike. In addition, they distributed portions to the males registered by genealogy, who were 3 years of age or older, to all who would enter the house of the Lord for their daily duties for service and the responsibilities of their divisions, and to the priests enrolled according to their families in the genealogy, as well as to the Levites 20 years of age or older according to their responsibilities and divisions. The genealogy included all the little ones, wives, sons, and daughters of the whole assembly, for they had faithfully consecrated themselves as holy. As for the priests, the descendants of Aaron who lived on the farmlands around each of their cities or in any other city, men were designated by name to distribute a portion to every male among the priests and to every Levite listed by their genealogies. So this is what Hezekiah did throughout Judah. He did what was good and upright and true before the Lord his God. He acted with all his heart in every work that he began in the service of the house of God, and in the law and the commandments, in order to seek his God, and so he prospered. Psalm 48, a song, a psalm of the sons of Korah. Great is the Lord and greatly to be praised in the city of our God, his holy mountain. Beautiful in loftiness, the joy of all the earth. Like the peaks of Zaphon is Mount Zion, the city of the great King. God is in her citadels. He has shown himself to be a fortress. For behold, the kings assembled. They all advanced together. They saw and were astounded. They fled in terror. Trembling seized them there, anguish like a woman in labor. With the wind from the east, you wrecked the ships of Tarshish. As we have heard, so we have seen in the city of the Lord of hosts. In the city of our God, God will establish her forever. Selah. Within your temple, O God, we contemplate your loving devotion. Your name, O God, like your praise, reaches to the ends of the earth. Your right hand is full of righteousness. Mount Zion is glad. The daughters of Judah rejoice on account of your judgments. March around Zion and circle her. Count her towers. Consider her ramparts. Tour her citadels, that you may tell the next generation. For this God is our God forever and ever. He will be our guide even till death. Hezekiah's reforms represent one of the great spiritual renewals in the history of Judah. After generations of compromise and idolatry, he took decisive action to restore the temple and bring the people of God back to God's covenant. And one of the most beautiful moments occurs when the Passover is celebrated again. People from both Judah and remnants of the northern tribes gather together to worship. This moment hints at God's continuing desire to reunite his people despite the earlier division of the kingdoms. And Psalm 48 fits beautifully with this moment in history, because the psalm celebrates Jerusalem as a city where God's presence dwells and where his protection is experienced. The message is clear. True security does not come from walls or armies or alliances. It comes from the presence of God among his people. Hezekiah's leadership reminds us that spiritual renewal often begins with courageous decisions to return to God wholeheartedly. Reflect on these things, folks. Today's reading was very encouraging and uplifting. And with that, we wrap up our session for today. We'll see you again tomorrow for day 201. God bless.